Have you ever confronted someone about something they clearly did, only to watch them deny it with complete confidence? With no hesitation, no apology, not even acknowledging the possibility that they might be wrong. Instead, they look at you directly in the eyes and begin rewriting the story. Suddenly, what happened didn't happen. What was said was never said. What hurt you becomes proof that you're too sensitive. And before long, you find yourself questioning not only the event, but your own perception of reality. The most damaging character attacks are rarely loud. They don't always arrive as direct insults or public accusations. Sometimes they arrive through denial, total denial, through omission, through subtle distortion designed to make you doubt what you know. Today, we are exploring why people deny their actions, why the search for accountability often may keep us trapped, and how true emotional defense begins the moment you stop requiring their admission to validate your reality. You know what you experience. Most people assume denial is simply dishonesty, but psychologically, denial is often more complicated. Most human beings carry an internal editor, which is a mechanism designed to protect the image they hold for themselves. When reality threatens that image, the mind often goes to work immediately, not necessarily to deceive others, but to avoid confronting painful truths. If, for example, someone sees themselves as kind, they may struggle to acknowledge cruelty. If someone sees themselves as honest, they may resist admitting deception. If they see themselves as loving, they may minimize harm they've caused. Their mind begins editing reality before accountability ever has a chance to step in. The goal isn't the truth. The goal is psychological comfort. This doesn't excuse behavior, but it explains why logical evidence often fails. You're trying to have a conversation about facts. They are trying to protect an identity. These are entirely different conversations, and that's why so many accountability discussions feel impossible. You bring evidence, you bring self-preservation. It doesn't work. One of the most exhausting experiences in life is trying to prove something you already know happened. You replay the conversations, you gather screenshots, you even revisit memories, you search your witnesses. You even become a lawyer presenting a case that should never require litigation. Why? Because you are hoping that enough evidence will finally force recognition. But very often it doesn't. Not because the evidence is weak, but simply because acceptance was never the goal. Protection was, and protection is remarkably resistant to the truth. This is where many people become trapped. They believe closure exists on the other side of admission. They would think things like, if they could just admit it, we could move on. If they would just acknowledge the truth, I could heal. But notice what happens. Your peace becomes dependent on their willingness to cooperate, to admit. Your emotional freedom becomes hostage to their honesty. And that is a dangerous place to live in. Denial often evolves around something more damaging: character erosion. Instead of discussing what happened, the focus shifts to who you are. The event disappears. Your reaction becomes an issue, and the conversation quietly changes form. You say, "That hurt me," and they may respond, "You're overreacting." You may say, "That isn't what happened," and they may respond, "You always misunderstand things. Why are you always bringing up these ideas?" You say, "I remember it differently." They will respond, "Your memory isn't reliable." Notice the pattern. The original action is no longer being examined. Your credibility is. This is what makes subtle character attacks so dangerous, my dear friends. They are difficult to identify in real time because they arrive disguised as concerns, clarifications, or even disagreements. But their effect is cumulative. They slowly teach you to distrust yourself. And once self-trust begins to erode, external control becomes easier. My dear friends, many people spend years trapped inside what we might call the accountability loop. They believe that healing requires confession from the other person. They believe closure requires acknowledgement from the other person, that peace requires validation. But what if that is not true? What if closure isn't something another person gives you? What if closure is something you grant to yourself? This is one of the most difficult psychological shifts a person can make for themselves. Because we naturally want fairness. We want the truth recognized. We want reality to be confirmed. But life doesn't always offer that. Sometimes people will never admit what happened. Some people will never apologize for their mistakes. Some people will never see the damage that they caused in a relationship. And some people see it perfectly well, but refuse to acknowledge it altogether. The tragedy even occurs when they suspend our healing while waiting. Well, we suspend our healing while waiting for them. Years pass, the apology never comes, and our lives remain stuck. The alternative is actually very important: radical honesty. Not with them, with yourself. Radical honesty says this: I know what I experienced. I know what happened. I know how it affected me, and I no longer require external approval to validate my truth. This is where emotional defense begins. Not through argument with other people, not through persuasion with them, not through endless evidences that would go nowhere, but through internal governance yourself. Internal governance simply means your reality is no longer a public debate. You document facts for your clarity. You trust your observations. You acknowledge your emotions. You stop outsourcing your perception to people who invested in distorting it in the first place. The goal isn't to win. The goal is to remain connected to reality. Your reality, connected to yourself. One of the most powerful skills you can develop is observation mode. Instead of immediately reacting to denial, you simply notice it. You observe the patterns. You observe the deflections, and you observe the rewriting without becoming emotionally entangled. This changes everything because denial relies on participation. The cycle requires your engagement and your frustration, your attempts to convince, your need to be understood. When you step back and simply observe, the machinery loses power. You stop fighting the distortion. You start recognizing it. And recognition is often more powerful than confrontation. When you do this, you have stopped the machine. So, my dear friend, the deepest form of emotional self-defense isn't proving you're right. It is refusing to abandon yourself when someone insists you're wrong. Not every truth will be acknowledged. Not every wound will receive an apology. That's okay. Not every attack will be exposed. But your peace does not require dear confession. Your healing does not require dear admission. Your reality does not require dear agreement. The moment you stop chasing accountability from those committed to avoiding it, you simply reclaim something far more valuable. You regain your sovereignty. You regain your clarity. You regain your peace. From that place, subtle character attacks lose power they once held, because your truth is no longer waiting for permission to exist. You know the truth, and you don't need permission from other people to validate it. It is the truth, and it stands as such. So, my dear friends, if this reflection resonated with you, please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and come back. Let's have these conversations to support and help each other become a better version of ourselves. Thank you for watching.